In the dusty hills of rural Kentucky, where the morning mist clings to the pines like a whispered secret, 17-year-old girl named Ellie Harper stood alone on a makeshift shooting range behind her grandfather's crumbling barn, cradling a rifle older than the nation itself, a weathered Springfield Model 1. 873 trapdoor, its barrel scarred from battles long forgotten. The year was 2025, and the world had moved on to carbon fiber stocks and digital optics. But Ellie's hands trembled not from fear, but from the weight of a legacy no one believed in anymore. A group of cocky National Guard recruits, fresh from Fort Knox and armed with the latest M4 carbines, had driven out to her. Families land on a dare, laughing as they watched her load a single .45 to 70 round into that ancient breech. "Sweetheart," their sergeant sneered, "that relic belongs in a museum, not a firing line." Ellie didn't answer. She just raised the rifle, her calloused fingers steady as stone, and squeezed the trigger. The crack echoed like thunder, and 500 yards away, a steel plate the size of a dinner plate spun wildly on its chain. The recruits' laughter died in their throats. If you're ready for a story that'll make your heart pound and your fists clench, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. We're about to dive into something unforgettable. Ellie Harper wasn't supposed to be anyone's hero. She was the daughter of a coal miner who'd lost his lungs to the mines, and a mother who'd lost her fight to cancer when Ellie was 12. The Harper farm, tucked in a hollow near Harlan, was a patchwork of rusted tractors and sagging fences held together by stubbornness and duct tape. Her grandfather, Jonah Harper, a Korean War vet who'd once taken a hill single-handedly with nothing but a garand and grit, had been her only teacher. He'd sit her on a stump when she was 6, showing her how to breathe with the wind, how to feel the rifle as an extension of her soul. "Ain't about the gun, Ellie girl," he'd rasp, his voice like gravel. "It's about the heart behind it." By the time she was 10, she could outshoot anyone in the county with that old trapdoor, a rifle passed down from a great-great-grandfather who'd fought at Gettysburg. But the world didn't care about heart in 2025. It cared about tech, about precision-guided systems, about soldiers who looked like they'd stepped out of a recruitment ad. The trouble started when the National Guard rolled into Harlan for a community outreach event, part of a new initiative to recruit rural kids into a military that was struggling to fill its ranks. The base at Fort Knox was hosting a shooting competition open to civilians, with a $10,000 prize and a chance to train with elite marksmen. Ellie's best friend, Mia, a wiry girl with a knack for trouble, signed her up as a joke. "Come on, Elle," Mia had said, grinning over a Coke at the diner, "show those city boys what a mountain girl can do." Ellie didn't want the attention, but she needed the money. The farm was 3 months behind on taxes, and the bank was circling like a vulture. So she showed up at the range that Saturday, her grandfather's rifle slung over her shoulder in a canvas case. Older than she was, her boots caked with mud, and her dark hair pulled back under a faded John Deere cap. The Fort Knox range was a different world, pristine lanes, electronic targets, soldiers in crisp camo barking orders through headsets. The competitors were a mix of weekend warriors, ex-cops, and a few cocky teens with AR-15s tricked out like Christmas trees. Then there was Ellie standing quietly at lane 12, ignored by everyone except the scorekeeper, who raised an eyebrow at her rifle when she unpacked it. The Springfield 1873 was a beast nearly 50 inches long, weighing 10 pounds, with iron sights that hadn't been touched since the 1890s. "You sure that thing's legal?" a soldier named Corporal Daniels asked, smirking as he adjusted his red dot sight. His buddies, a trio of recruits named Riley, Torres, and Hayes, laughed along, their M4S gleaming under the floodlights. "Bet she can't even hit the backdrop," Riley muttered, loud enough for Ellie to hear. The competition had 3 stages, 100 yards, 300 yards, and a grueling 600-yard shoot with wind gusts kicking up dust devils across the range. The first stage was child's play for Ellie. She lay prone on the mat, her cheek pressed to the stock, and fired 5 rounds in under a minute. Each one punched a perfect hole in the 10 ring. The electronic scoreboard flashed her score 50 out of 50. Daniels scowled but said nothing. The crowd, mostly military folks and a few locals, started to murmur. By the 300-yard mark, Ellie was tied for first with a former Marine named Sergeant Polk, a grizzled sniper with a custom Remington 700. But it was the 600-yard stage where the real test came. The wind was howling at 15 miles an hour, shifting left to right, and the targets were barely visible through the haze. One by one, the competitors faltered. Daniels missed 3 shots entirely. Riley's fancy optic fogged up, and he cursed loud enough to earn a glare from the rangemaster. Torres and Hayes barely broke 30 points. Then it was Ellie's turn. She didn't rush. She knelt beside her lane, feeling the wind on her face, her eyes half closed, as she listened to the world the way her grandfather had taught her. She loaded a single round, the brass casing glinting in the sun. The recruits were openly mocking her now, leaning against their rifles like they were at a bar. "Go back to the farm, kid," Hayes called. "Leave the shooting to the pros." Ellie didn't flinch. She raised the trapdoor, her hand steady as a surgeon's, and fired. The steel target rang like a bell. She reloaded, fired again. 4 more times, each shot a perfect hit. The scoreboard lit up, 50 out of 50. The range went silent. Sergeant Polk, standing nearby, let out a low whistle. "Kid's got a gift," he muttered to the range master. But Daniels wasn't ready to let it go. Beginner's luck, he spat, loud enough for the crowd to hear. "Bet she can't do it under pressure." The range master, a no-nonsense major named Carter, overheard the challenge. He was a man who'd seen every kind of shooter in his 30 years, and something about Ellie's quiet focus had caught his eye. "All right, Outshot," he said to Daniels. "You want pressure? Let's make this interesting, head-to-head. You and your M4 against her and whatever that museum piece is. 3 shots, 600 yards, worst wind we've had all day. Winner takes the prize and bragging rights." The crowd buzzed. This wasn't part of the program, but Carter was the boss and nobody argued with him. Ellie's heart pounded, but she nodded. She didn't care about the money anymore. She cared about shutting them up. The wind was brutal now, gusting up to 20 miles an hour, kicking dirt into everyone's eyes. Daniels went first, his M4 barking rapidly. 2 hits, 1 miss, a solid 20 out of 30. He turned to Ellie with a smirk, like he'd already won. She didn't look at him. She lay down again, her body low to the ground, the trapdoor's weight grounding her. The first shot missed, the wind caught it just wrong. The crowd gasped. Daniels laughed outright. But Ellie didn't panic. She adjusted, her fingers moving with a precision born of years in the hills, and fired again. Clang. Center mass. The 3rd shot followed, and the target spun again. 2 out of 3. A tie. The range master stepped forward, his face unreadable. "Sudden death," he declared. 1 shot each. First to hit wins. Daniels went pale but nodded. He fired quickly, too quickly. The bullet went wide, kicking up dirt short of the target. The crowd held its breath. Ellie closed her eyes for a moment, picturing her grandfather's voice. "Feel the wind, Ellie girl. Let it tell you where to go." She opened her eyes, raised the rifle, and squeezed. The crack was deafening. The target rang. Clear as day. The range erupted in cheers, locals hollering louder than anyone. Daniels stood frozen, his face red as his beret. Ellie didn't celebrate. She just stood, slung the rifle over her shoulder, and walked off the line. Word of Ellie's performance spread like wildfire. By Monday, a video of the shootout, shot on someone's phone, had 500,000 views. On 10th, the caption: "Read, Kentucky farm girl humiliates National Guard with 150-year-old rifle." The comments were a mix of awe and disbelief. Is this real? No way that gun's accurate at 600 yards. Who is this girl? The military, however, wasn't laughing. Major Carter called Ellie personally, asking her to come back to Fort Knox for a private evaluation. "We've got some people who want to see what you can do," he said, his voice gruff but respectful. Ellie didn't want to go. She hated the spotlight, but the farm was drowning, and Carter hinted at a scholarship program for recruits with exceptional potential. When she arrived at Fort Knox, she was met by a team of instructors from the Army Marksmanship Unit, the best shooters in the world. They weren't there to mock her this time. They were curious. They set up a series of tests, moving targets, low-light conditions even. A simulated combat scenario with pop-up threats at varying distances. Ellie's trapdoor was a liability in some ways. It was slow to reload, heavy, and lacked modern optics. But Ellie didn't need modern. She read the wind like a poet reads a sonnet, adjusted for drop like she was born to it. By the end of the day, She'd outshot half the EMU team, including a captain who'd won medals in international competitions. "Where'd you learn to shoot like that?" he asked, genuinely stunned. Ellie just shrugged. "My granddad." The twist came when the EMU's commander, Colonel Hargrove, pulled Ellie aside. "We're not just impressed, Miss Harper," he said. "We're worried. The Army's been pouring billions into smart rifles, exosuits, AI targeting. And here you are, a kid with a gun older than electricity, beating our best. You're a problem for the Pentagon's budget, not for us." He wasn't joking. Ellie's performance had caught the attention of a defense contractor, Sentinel Dynamics, who'd been pushing a $2 billion contract for a new AI-assisted sniper system. If a teenager with a 19th-century rifle could outperform their tech, the contract was at risk. Sentinel's CEO, a slick DC insider named Richard Voss, flew to Fort Knox himself, demanding Ellie be disqualified from future events. "She's an anomaly," he told Hargrove. "A PR nightmare. We can't have her undermining confidence in our systems." Ellie overheard the conversation from the hallway, her stomach twisting. She wasn't just a farm girl anymore, she was a threat. That night she called Mia, her voice shaking. "They don't want me to shoot, Mia. They want me gone." Mia, never one to back down, had an idea. "Then we make regret it," she said. "We go bigger." She contacted a journalist she knew from Louisville, a woman named Claire Monroe, who'd built a career exposing military waste. Claire was skeptical at first, but when Mia sent her the range video and Ellie's test scores, she was hooked. "This is David and Goliath with a 45-70, Claire said. "I'm in." The showdown came at the National Military Shooting Championships in Quantico, Virginia, a month later. Ellie was invited as a guest shooter, a polite way of saying they wanted to control the narrative. Sentinel Dynamics had stacked the deck. New rules required all competitors to use modern firearms, effectively banning Ellie's trapdoor. The crowd, now numbering in the thousands thanks to viral clips, booed when the announcement was made. Claire Monroe was there, live streaming to X with 1 million viewers. "They're scared of a 17-year-old girl," she told her audience. "Let's see why." Ellie didn't fight the rule. Instead, she did something no one expected. She borrowed a standard-issue M4 from Sergeant Polk, the Marine who'd been kind to her at Fort Knox. "Show. It ain't the gun," he'd said, handing it over. The final event was a brutal stress test. 10 targets, 100 to 800 yards, with distraction, smoke, noise, even simulated incoming fire. The favorite was Captain Reese, Sentinel's hand-picked champion, using their prototype AI rifle. The system was supposed to be foolproof, adjusting for wind, humidity, even the shooter's heartbeat. Reese was cocky, smirking at Ellie as they took their positions. "Nice try, farm girl," he said. "Go home." The horn sounded, and the range became chaos. Targets popped up and vanished. Smoke grenades hissed. Ellie moved like she was back in the hills, dodging and weaving, the M4 an extension of her body. She didn't have AI, but she had instinct. Reese's rifle, for all its tech, lagged. Its algorithms couldn't keep up with the chaos. He missed 4 targets. Ellie missed none. The final target at 800 yards was barely visible through the smoke. Reese fired and missed. Ellie dropped to the ground, her breath steady and squeezed. The target fell. The crowd roared so loud it shook the bleachers. Sentinel's contract was dead by morning. The Pentagon launched an investigation into cost overruns, and Ellie's face was on every major network. But the victory wasn't sweet. Voss, desperate to save face, leaked a story to a tabloid claiming Ellie had cheated, that her grandfather's rifle had been illegally modified. The lie spread fast, and suddenly Ellie was getting hate mail, death threats, her family's farm vandalized. She was ready to quit, to disappear back into the hills, when Major Carter showed up at her door with a surprise. "The Army wants you," he said, "not as a publicity stunt, as a recruit. And we don't care about Sentinel or their lies." Ellie joined the Army at 18, the youngest member of the marksmanship unit in history. She trained with the best, but she never forgot the trapdoor. She kept it in her locker, a reminder of where she came from. Years later, when she was a sergeant herself, teaching a new generation of shooters, she'd tell them the same thing her grandfather told her. It ain't about the gun. It's about the heart. And every time a cocky recruit rolled their eyes at her stories, she'd take them to the range, hand them the old Springfield, and watch their jaws drop when she outshot them with iron sights and a prayer. Ellie Harper never chased fame. She just wanted to save her family's farm. But in a world obsessed with tech, she proved that sometimes the oldest tools, wielded by the strongest hearts, are all you need to change everything. From the hills of Kentucky to the halls of the Pentagon, her story became legend. A reminder that courage doesn't need a battery, and grit doesn't need an upgrade. So, tell me in the comments from which part of the country are you watching this video.